We got two games this Saturday. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we'll see the 9-5 Houston Texans +3 on the road taking on the team with the best record in the NFL, the defending champions Kansas City Chiefs. These are two teams who are on top of their division. The Houston Texans are in first place in the AFC South Division and the Kansas City Chiefs are in first place in the AFC West Division. The history between these two teams when they face each other is as follows. The Kansas City Chiefs leads the series 9-5, including playoff victories. In those 14 games, KC scored 409 points, while the Texans scored 305 points. That's 104 points differential. The Houston Texans are 1-3 in the last 4 meetings against the Kansas City Chiefs. The Texans are 4-1 straight up in December and 4-1 against the spread on Saturdays. This past Sunday, the Texans barely got passed by the Miami Dolphins. They ended up winning the game thanks to an interception by DB Derek Stingley Jr. C.J. Stroud in that game completed 18 out of 26 passes for 131 yards and 2 touchdown passes. But the real MVPs of that game was their defense. They forced 5 turnovers, 2 fumbles and 3 interceptions and also sacked Tua 3 times. Now here are how the Texans' offensive players and defensive players been performing so far. C.J. Stroud has thrown for 3,248 yards, 17 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. Joe Mixon has 910 yards on the ground on 217 attempts with 11 touchdowns. Nico Collins has 849 yards, 53 receptions and 6 touchdowns. Now let's look at the defensive side of the ball. Linebacker Henry To'oTo'o leads the team in tackles with 44 solo tackles and 42 assists. Defensive end Danielle Hunter has 42 solo tackles, 12 sacks, and 1 forced fumble. Quarterback Kalen Bullock has 41 solo tackles and 5 interceptions. Great numbers so far by the key players of the Houston Texans. Kansas City, on the other hand, keep proving why they're the best team in the NFL in the last 3 to 4 years. The possibilities of them doing a three-peat are remarkable. They currently sitting in first place in the AFC Conference Division. They also have the best record in the NFL this season and are rolling hot right now. They finally had a dominant win and took care of business on both sides of the ball, beating the Cleveland Browns 21-7 and sparking up a 4-game winning streak. Patrick Mahomes completed half of his passing attempts, going 19 for 38 with 159 yards and 2 touchdown passes. The Chiefs' defense also showed up this week against the Browns, forcing 6 turnovers, 2 fumbles, and 4 interceptions. But that wasn't the big story of the night. Patrick Mahomes went down and came out the game when he suffered a high sprained ankle injury. The great news, though, was that Mahomes was able to walk to the sidelines under his own power. The X-rays also came back negative. However, the status on Mahomes taking the field against the Texans is unclear at the moment. They recently got back running back Isaiah Pacheco and kicker Harrison Butker, but still have Rashee Rice on injured reserve. But losing 3-time Super Bowl champion Patrick Mahomes this week will be the biggest loss of their season. If Mahomes won't be able to suit up, then the Chiefs will go with former Super Bowl 52 champion Carson Wentz. We seen him take the field last week when Mahomes went down, but other than that he hasn't played much this season. Carson Wentz in his career has thrown for 3,310 completions, 22,312 yards, 153 touchdowns, and 67 interceptions. Those aren't bad numbers for a backup QB if you ask me, but the dynamic and the chemistry Patrick Mahomes brings to the team is unmatched. It won't be the same with Wentz at QB. Even though the Chiefs might not have Mahomes this week, but they still have a few weapons on offense. Tight end Travis Kelce, who has 709 yards, 84 receptions, and 2 touchdowns. Wide receivers DeAndre Hopkins, who has 393 yards, 35 receptions, and 4 touchdowns. Xavier Worthy, who has 494 yards, 44 receptions, and 4 touchdowns. Also duo running backs Isaiah Pacheco, who has 266 yards rushing on 68 attempts and 1 touchdown. Kareem Hunt, who has 653 rushing yards on 180 attempts and 5 touchdowns. And their defense are ranked 5th in the NFL. They are led by linebacker Nick Bolton, who has 66 solo tackles and 28 assists. Defensive end George Kalaftis, who has 32 solo tackles and 7 sacks. Defensive tackle Chris Jones, who has 35 solo tackles, 16 assists, and 12 sacks. Quarterback Trent McDuffie, who has 37 solo tackles, 13 assists, and 1 interception. And last but not least, safety Jaden Hicks, who has 14 solo tackles and 2 interceptions. The Chiefs' defense this season has led up 18 points per game, making it hard for teams to score on them. My prediction in this one is as follows. If Patrick Mahomes ends up playing, I see them trying to get the run game going with Pacheco and Hunt. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not doubting Mahomes if he does plays because we've seen him do incredible things, but we'll see how much that ankle holds up if he does end up playing. However, if they decide to go with Carson Wentz and the ground game gets going, I see Carson Wentz tearing the defense apart through the air. They also need their defense to show up in a big way and get after CJ Stroud and stop Joe Mixon in the running game. If they're able to do those things, then I see the Chiefs winning this game. For the Texans, on the other hand, are going to have a flawless performance. Mistakes in this one won't cut it, and the Chiefs' defense are ranked 5th for a reason. If the Texans' offensive line are able to hold their blocks and open holes for Mixon, then it will be a long day for the Chiefs' defense. Running the ball opens up play action, and it also opens up the airways for deep throws downfield. If the ground game gets going early, look for Stroud to start connecting with Nico Collins. He's been tearing it up since coming back from injury. They also need to try and get tight end Dalton Schultz involved more and become a big factor in this game, and the same goes for Tank Dell. The Texans' defensive coordinator can't hold back either, especially if Mahomes plays. He's going to have his defense be first at all times and try to get pressure on Mahomes or Wentz, whoever ends up playing. They also can't let Pacheco get going. If the Texans are able to do those things, then I see them winning this game in a close one, but let's not forget the Kansas City Chiefs are playing home. With all that being said, my pick is the Chiefs at home -3. My prediction score is 34-27. And yes, I know Mahomes might not play, but I still think they got enough firepower to outlast the Texans. I also have a few player props for that game. Travis Kelce 75+ yards and 1 touchdown. DeAndre Hopkins 40+ yards. Xavier Worthy 40+ yards. Isaiah Pacheco 60+ rushing and receiving combined and 1 touchdown. Kareem Hunt 50+ rushing and receiving combined. Carson Wentz over 150 yards passing, 1 touchdown pass. Patrick Mahomes 150 yards passing, 1 touchdown pass. Joe Mixon 50+ yards rushing and receiving combined and 1 touchdown. Nico Collins 60+ yards and 1 touchdown. Tank Dell 25+ yards receiving. Dalton Schultz 25+ yards receiving. CJ Stroud 150+ yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Those were my player props for this game, and once again my pick in this game is the Kansas City Chiefs. Now let's get into our second game of the afternoon. We'll see the 10-3 Pittsburgh Steelers +6.5 go down to Baltimore to take on the 9-5 Baltimore Ravens. The Pittsburgh Steelers are 10-4 against the spread and 5-3 against the spread on the road. The Baltimore Ravens are 7-6-1 against the spread and 2-3-1 against the spread at home. These two teams' head-to-head stats are as follow. The Steelers are 7-3 against the spread versus the Ravens, and they also lead the matchup series 36-25. The Steelers also won the last 4 meetings and last season they beat Baltimore 2 times. In their first matchup last season, they won 16-13, and in the second matchup they beat the Ravens 17-10, and that was in Week 18 of last season. But 10 months later, they faced each other once again, and the Steelers won that game 18-16. Russell Wilson played in that game, and his performance wasn't Russell Wilson-like, but was enough to walk out with a victory. He completed 23 out of 36 passes for 205 yards and 1 interception. He's also 2-2 against the Ravens. The Steelers, though, didn't start off the season with Russell Wilson, but it was only cause he was injured. They started the season with former Chicago Bears QB Justin Fields, who finished last season with 2,562 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 9 INTs. But before Russell Wilson stepped in, Justin Fields started 6 games, going 4-2 as a starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers. In those 6 games, he threw for a combined 1,106 yards, 5 touchdown passes, and 1 interception. Russell Wilson, on the other hand, been playing really great. He's 6-2 as a starter this season and showing some flashes of vintage Russell Wilson. So far this season, he has thrown for 1,912 yards, 13 touchdown passes, and 3 interceptions. If you ask me, both QBs for the Steelers this season have a winning record. But despite the 4 games Fields won, they still went with their original plan once Wilson was ready to go. One would think Justin Fields would ask for a trade or sign with another team, knowing the Steelers were gonna go with Wilson no matter what. But that wasn't the case. This kid's humbleness is unmatched, and it speaks volumes. No matter who's taking the snaps for the Steelers this season, one thing is for sure: they're back to their old glory days. They are in first place in the AFC North Division and gripping a third-place seed in the playoff picture. Even though they've been playing great as of late, they took a brutal loss to the Philadelphia Eagles last week, 13-27. The Steelers been missing their number 1 wideout George Pickens, and against the Eagles it was shown. George Pickens' numbers before he went down are as follow. He has 55 catches for 850 yards with 3 touchdowns. However, Russell Wilson in that game in my eyes played too cautious and only completed 14 passes out of 22 attempts for 128 yards and 1 touchdown. Even though Russell Wilson didn't turn over the ball, his performance wasn't enough to beat the Eagles. I know the Steelers and Russell Wilson can't wait for Pickens to come back into the lineup, but for now expect RW to connect with his other wideouts, especially Calvin Austin. This season so far he's caught 28 passes for 452 yards and 4 touchdowns. He's also got to get Mike Williams going in this one. Williams this season has 17 catches for 249 yards and 1 touchdown. Also, fourth-year tight end Pat Frayer got to get more involved in the offense. This season, he has 47 catches for 492 yards and 6 touchdowns. Now let's not forget about their top 10 defense, who will be led by linebackers Patrick Queen and TJ Watt. Patrick Queen has 109 solo tackles and 1 forced fumble. TJ Watt has 54 solo tackles, 11.5 sacks with 6 forced fumbles. They also have a lockdown corner in Dante Jackson, who has 34 solo tackles and 5 interceptions. Look for them to keep causing havoc on the opponents and trying to shut down Lamar Jackson and the Ravens offense. Now let's get into these Ravens. In the offseason, they were able to acquire former Tennessee Titans running back Derrick Henry. Now the Ravens' backfield never looked deadlier or more dangerous. Derrick Henry last season for the Titans, he rushed for 1,167 yards with 12 touchdowns. This season for the Ravens, he's rushed for 1,474 yards and 13 touchdowns. He's already put up more yards than last season and also scored 1 more touchdown than last season. He's also ranked second among running backs in the NFL. They are 1 game behind the Steelers and currently gripping a 5th place in the AFC Conference playoffs picture. Lamar Jackson and the Ravens last week had a dominating victory over the Giants after losing the week prior to the Eagles at home 24-19. But that loss was 2 weeks ago, and last week Lamar Jackson and the Ravens flew to MetLife Stadium in New York and just took over the place like if they were the new owners. The Ravens were flawless on both sides of the ball. They put a beating on the Giants, and Lamar Jackson once again reminded everyone why he's the NFL's MVP in the last 2 years or so. His numbers against the Giants were amazing. He completed 21 passes out of 25 attempts and once again 5 touchdown passes. He also didn't throw an interception. This is the 2nd or 3rd time this season Lamar Jackson has thrown for 5 touchdowns. Not only can he kill defenses with his legs, now he's doing it with his arm and becoming even harder to game plan for him. One of those 5 touchdown passes was caught by tight end Mark Andrews, who broke the Ravens franchise record in touchdown scoring. Bateman also snagged 2 touchdown catches himself, who've been stepping it up in recent weeks. Lamar Jackson so far this season has 3,580 yards, 34 touchdown passes, and 3 interceptions. He also rushed for 743 yards with 3 rushing touchdowns. Even though Lamar Jackson and the Ravens were dominant last week against the Giants. But they can't say the same thing when they face the Pittsburgh Steelers though. In their last 4 meetings, Lamar Jackson is 1-3 in his career, including playoff games. I bet that's one stat he wishes he can change. They already took a loss to the Steelers this season, but if they're able to win this game, then the Ravens will tie up the season series 1-1, and not only that, they will also be tied for first place in the AFC North Division. And with only 2 weeks left in this NFL season, anything can happen. Another key element for the Ravens is their defense. We've seen highs and lows from them all season, and we don't know what type of Ravens defense will show up. We've seen them being dominant last week, but can the same outcome repeat itself this week? One thing is for sure, and it's that veteran middle linebacker Kyle Van Noy will make sure his guys on defense are ready this week. Van Noy this season has 29 solo tackles with a forced fumble. Inside linebacker Roquan Smith also will be ready and trying to get after Russell Wilson. Smith this season leads the team in solo tackles with 126, and he also has a forced fumble. Now let's not forget about cornerback Marlon Humphrey, who has 53 solo tackles with 5 interceptions. With all that being said, and really looking into this, I see the Baltimore Ravens walking out victorious in this one. TJ Watt is still a little banged up, and who knows how long he'll stay in the game, and they also have Pickens out on offense. Russell Wilson struggled last week trying to get passes completed, and with Pickens out once again, he'll struggle in this one. Also, Derrick Henry is itching for a dominating performance, and what a way to do it versus the Steelers. I'm picking the Baltimore Ravens -6.5 at home. Now here are a few player props picks for this game. Russell Wilson plus 150 yards, 1 passing touchdown, and 1 rushing touchdown. Najee Harris 50 plus rushing and receiving combined and 1 touchdown. Calvin Austin 40 plus yards receiving and over 3 receptions. Mike Williams over 2 receptions, 25 plus yards receiving. Pat Frayer 25 plus yards over 2 receptions. Lamar Jackson over 200 yards passing and rushing, combined 1 touchdown pass and 1 rushing touchdown. Derrick Henry over 10 carries, over 60 plus yards rushing and receiving combined, and 1 touchdown. Mark Andrews over 3 receptions, 40 plus yards and a touchdown. Rashad Bateman 40 plus yards over 3 receptions. Isaiah Likely 25 plus yards and 3 receptions. Zay Flowers 40 plus yards receiving, over 3 receptions and 1 touchdown. Those were my player props picks for this game. Again, I'm picking the Baltimore Ravens -6.5 at home. Thanks for taking 20 minutes out your time to listen and watch this video. I really appreciate it, it means a lot to me. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you do so you won't miss out on any of my picks or insights on games and matchups. Also, don't be afraid to give me some feedback or how to make things easier and better. With that being said, I'm going to get into Sunday's NFL matchups and break those games down too. Everyone have a blessed night and weekend. Let's get this money bag.